Oshare na suit? No, thank you, Kamiya. Not necessary, but I appreciate it. I don't have any benefits for subscriptions other than my gratitude. Appreciate it. Oshare na sutsu. Yes. Sutsu wa dou desu ka? Son of a bee sting. Oh, I forgot this. That's fine. That's fine. Who cares about demonstratives? Heck demonstratives. Okay. Ken-san no presento wa udetoke no? Oh, atarashi udetoke. Yes. Okay.
新しい
Watch. We just spent 2+ hours on some good advice. I think you are as well deserving of subs. Oh, I appreciate those kind words. Things are free though, you know. It's I like to give a shout out to all the people that I was lucky to encounter that made my life incredibly privileged, right? They enable me to have a very privileged life. So, my parents and all the people that I've met along the way, all the people, those professors, right? The professors you are describing and all that, Yoko, that is so wonderful that you have people like that. They will make, I mean, I know this might be a little bold. I don't predict the future, but by the time you become my age, I feel like if you manage to get a little sprinkle of luck and networking and whatnot, I think you'll surround yourself with incredible people, successful people. You yourself will attract other people like you, in which those people inspired you too in return, right? And at some point, you get to just continue to do what you like to do. And then whenever you have to do something, shrug it off. You get it done, right? That's kind of the life balance I feel many are capable of doing, but perhaps not many were given the chances and opportunity to develop that. So 1% at a time. I, in my opinion, have gotten to a privileged position where I can spend time maybe entertaining one person, and maybe that one person can then invest forward in another person, and so on and so forth. I think that's generally the perspective of the professors that are reaching out to you and trying. They believe, in my opinion, I would say we would have a very wonderful roundtable coffee explainer that if you help one person, that person could help another person, and it's multiplicative from there. You have no, it's very incredibly difficult to gauge in hindsight from a person. A person will always be an individual at the end of the day, you know, like stand alone as the only person inside your head. But it's incredible how much investing, when the opportunity affords itself, that you can encounter people who then encounter other people. So thank you. 2 hours well spent, but it's always well spent if you can leave a person with a piece of you. And that's kind of what I do most of the time. I strive to at least leave something. Right? It could be a bad feeling. That's happened before. You know. It can happen. But yeah. It sounds like you're definitely going to be a-okay. I wouldn't be surprised if you would end up being a pharmacist in Japan even. Actually, have you ever considered that? Have you visited Japan before, Kamiya? That would be interesting way. Like, those professors you have mentioned definitely made an impact. Even when I was feeling incompetent, yeah. It, I think that highlights one thing that's even better than I can ever conceive. Um, when you have someone who doesn't make you feel more incompetent or being incompetent, but make you feel that even within your incompetence phase, everything will be okay. I know it sounds coddling and stuff. I'm more of a coddler than I am a whip snapper. So whenever I see an opportunity to encourage someone, it's kind of nice. It's opportunity well spent. So if there's anyone, if you feel incompetent at the time, I felt incompetent too. Actually, thanks, Manifest. Thank you. Um, One thing I have to say when it comes to incompetence uh, is that I don't think the people who make you feel the competent people around you will often make you feel incompetent. But the nice thing is when you're around them, they make you feel like even no matter how incompetent you are, everything's gonna be okay, right? I think that's just priceless. So what I say about that is because this professor, this person that influenced me a lot, I don't even know how to convey how much he influenced me, but I have met him, like we have met back, like me and my friends have shared a meal with this person post graduation, like many years post graduation. And when somehow the topic came up about like how are students these days, and then the first thing that actually me and my friends agreed on was that we were really incompetent back then. We were so lazy. Like, just understanding what we could have done in retrospect, and then this professor, basically said, "What do you mean? Like, you guys were doing great. I mean, you did your best." Like, they have such an aged wisdom about them, and that's kind of how I am now. So like that comment that I was making, that I'm telling right now, he was the same age when that conversation went. He was around the same age as I am now. Like, he's much older than me now. But when we were talking back then, and all my friends and I, we were getting close to graduating, like we were deep in our PhD careers, and he was talking about stuff and sharing, and he still has that same old enthusiasm and crazy things. And at some point I remember, like, I just had to say something, like, we were lazy back then. We did really well, but we could have done better, right, in retrospect. But he took it upon himself to be like, well, you were kids, like you were younger and all that stuff. And like, no, that person has perspective because they've been teaching kids, right, or like teaching students in that age group. And now, pretty much around his same age now that I am, I feel the same way. So it's kind of one of those things, like, it goes full circle. You have someone who says, like, no, you don't understand. You will eventually. It's okay, right? Fast forward, and that's kind of how that works out. So lots of times there's something really, really precious and awesome about that. It's kind of like raising a kid, right? You trust, you share your love and the opportunities, and having the assurance, like, okay, I know you're hurting right now, or, oh, this seems unfair, or, this seems impossible, but it'll be all okay, right? If you have someone like that, those are the people you keep with you. Yeah, after a few mistakes you made in the beginning, I treat every opportunity with like more gratitude. I know, right? And you seize them, right? When you see opportunities, you seize them. That's where that more gratitude comes from. You seize them and don't push them off and whatnot. Like, yeah, I'm better than this opportunity. Or, oh, this opportunity isn't good enough. Or, oh, this is a mistake. Like, you start entertaining all of it. It'll all be okay. Great times. Great times. Thanks for the share. It's it's incredibly heartwarming to um hear someone having a good time in college. I have a personal friend now that I met through online, like Twitch and stuff. They're going through college, and that's still my advice today. Like, remember that the people that are in formal education are there to try their best. So, like, farm them, quote unquote, farm them. That's my like edgy way of farm them for advice. Like, make them notice you. The ones that will notice you will likely be someone that will lead you to the future. They will be able to network. They will earnestly, you will know. It becomes very obvious when you input some effort and see if they reciprocate back. Obviously, there will be people who won't reciprocate back. With that experience, you can become better and better at doing so. How do you get great at knowing what are good opportunities and bad opportunities? By doing them, right? Like, what I mean is, if you're always there waiting for the perfect opportunity, then you have no experience to safeguard you against poor opportunities and excellent opportunities, or appropriate opportunities for you. So it does take trial and error to some extent, regardless of how well informed you are. Obviously, there are very amateurish like red flags and whatnot, but the nuances of finding optimal opportunity requires experience too. And one of the optimal, like, reasonable places to get them are people who spent a lot of time with opportunities, or like your professors or your academic advisors. What more appropriate person to give you a possibility of, appropriate advice and opportunities than one that who literally has to do that for a living, regardless if it disagrees with you or not, right? One is more experienced than the other. Not someone who has a parasocial parasocial relationship with. Unfortunately. I mean, if you ask those people, they'd probably be like, yeah, I'm not comfortable knowing this. But hey, if you have a family or friend who is also kind of like similar, go for that. The people that I would say would be like John Green and Hank Green. If I sat down with John Green and Hank Green, I'm like a fanboy of John Green and Hank Green at this point. If I sat down, they would probably feel a little uncomfortable if someone went up to them and said, I'm your biggest fan. I know you don't know that I exist. I basically use your life as a blueprint for everything I make decisions in my life. I would feel like someone like that, if they actually had direct connection, they would feel very uncomfortable that your advice, your main source of advice, is coming from a parasocial relation, as opposed to someone who is in integral and direct contact with you. And it's such a privilege to have that. The advisors I have had go by a guideline from what I experienced. The professors have helped me build a schedule based off your prerequisites. Sounds like they're doing their job. At least, you know what I mean? At least. I don't think you get that very much anymore. That's kind of what you're paying for. I don't think you're paying for... I know this is going to downplay some of the formal education stuff. You're not paying for the content. You're kind of paying for the people, so to speak. So, like, and then here's another thing. This might be an unpopular opinion. The cost of how much that costs is really how expensive those people are. Not necessarily the content, if you know what I mean. The content you can probably get on the internet. So yes, some people could make an argument it's like, why do I need to learn math from a professor when I can learn on the internet? That's true. But what you're paying for is the person, not the content. Like, because the content, yeah, you're right. Like, if you want to learn math and you're self-motivated, you can probably learn the same subject. But what are you not getting from self-studying and brute forcing and learning math on your own? The person, right? Like, what do you think is the most expensive part of the education? It's accessibility to the person. Like, I can definitely agree with you, and it's true for all around. Like, the logic is sound for most of the people who don't like going to formal education. Like, I hate the classroom, I don't like learning math. It's like, yeah, that's true, but that's not what you're paying for, in my opinion. The thing that costs the most is actually the people. So the stickler between paying a really expensive education at a university is that you have a better odds of finding the people that you can get the money's worth, not the content. You can get the content anywhere. You can go online. Like, language learning is just that, right? When someone asks, "Oh, what's the difference between Duolingo, Anki, uh, Pimsleur, LingQ, etc.?" They're all apps. They're not people you're paying for, right? And then when you go and suddenly think about the gold standard, is like a person. A person is the gold standard. So, and it's not accessible, right? It's not accessible. So, to me, the mindset is it doesn't matter how bad you're doing or how good you're doing. If you have access to the person, everything will be okay. A person cares about your success, then you'll be successful, in my opinion. You'll likely be successful. You're more likely to be successful when people care about you. Self-study, content, those things do not care about you. That's up to you. You make the value out of the content because the other person doesn't know you exist. So all of that is great, probably free, accessible. The question is, do you have enough people in your life that have imparted wisdom on you to be able to synthesize all that information? I think over these couple 100 days or like couple months, I've met some really, really brilliant people. However, it's pretty clear to me that they don't talk or interact with a lot of people like directly. They interact indirectly. Like, oh, I know this, here's my advice. I know this, here's my advice. Have you ever talked to someone giving advice? Like, have you ever exchanged advice? Because that's not how that works. People don't listen to people who keeps talking at or past the person. They talk with the person. So most of these things, in my opinion, become incredibly apparent when the person themselves have the privilege and the opportunity to interact with another person. So your professors, whether you're intuiting it or not, or you're like analyzing it or not, you, in my opinion, that interaction will leave intuitive experience onto a person that makes you valuable and makes that professor valuable to you. Because then you will go on to be able to teach, explain things, right? You don't even have to teach anything. When you're at a job, you have to sell things, right? So you have to connect with people. People don't have to connect with you. You just have to connect with people to sell them things or to get them to do things, right? However, those professors are interacting with you now. So you're probably going to get a lot of experience doing that interaction. And then when you go on to like do professional work and interact with team members and stuff, you're probably going to do the same. You're practically a sponge for communication. That's kind of where the whole, like, if your parents don't interact with you regularly, where else are you going to get these interactions? In my generation, it wasn't the internet, it was everything else. So most of my mannerisms and stuff to this day comes from my friends I met in college, my professors, and all my advisors. On the internet, you're guessing how they're behaving by looking at what they're doing. You're not directly interacting with them. I like those interactions. I used to like to do solo work, starting college, but now I enjoy working with others, especially those who care about the work. Yeah, exactly. I think you highlight one of the biggest separators between scholastics and let's just say the self-entrepreneur, right? I can tell you now, agreeability, diction, communication, and writing, it's like night and day. You can pull, like, to me and you probably at this point, because of how you're interacting with your professor, you can probably pick out who are the people who work professionally and work in a team versus those who choose not to take open criticism and be able to work in a team environment, right? It's not to say that they can't be successful, because there are pioneers who, like, they're one-man shows. Fair enough, one-person shows. They just happen to be visionaries, and that's great. People have to work with them, right? Because they're the GOAT. That's fair enough. However, you can pick out who's driven by themselves and who's a team player. So when you ask advice in the future, you know exactly who to pick out. If you had an opportunity, you're limited in time. If you can pick 10 people out, and they'll say, like, in the internet, you can talk to any 10 people, right? And then you give like 200 individuals, you're more likely to consistently be able to pick out the person who immediately will care about you and offer you advice that's tailored to you than picking out a person who you hope you're exactly the same, so whatever their advice is appropriate. The chances of you being exactly like the person, and then they only care about themselves by giving their advice, so then it helps, right? Because you're exactly like the person, versus a person, no matter what you ask them, they will try their best to know what's useful to you and then provide advice. So those are two very different people, and they both can be incredibly successful. But the way they talk, the way they write, their mannerisms and stuff become incredibly obvious when you're exposed to it. And kids who do not go to, like, any form of institution, forced to, they don't usually get exposure to situations where you have to do this. So naturally now, in my opinion, the vast majority of people that I interact with now are people who are alone. They only have themselves to rely on, and that sucks. They are really talented. They're incredibly hardworking most of the time. However, they are filled with insecurities, anxieties, and whatnot, because in my opinion, I would be insecure, anxious, and worried if no one is there to catch me. Right? You can be incredibly talented. You can place so much stress on yourself, and you can be successful without having the ability to interact with other people and knowing that you can be helped and you can help others. There's no safety net. So if you fail, you burn, right? And what is left to catch you? Well, maybe Google and other people will come up with an idea, or perhaps someone, a stranger who walks by, and it just happens to be that person that can catch you, right? Otherwise, you have a whole population of people who haven't decided to prioritize knowing that you can't do everything yourself and be able to surround yourself with networks. The reason why I say this is it's not like my life was perfect. It was very big dips and very big highs, like highs and lows. But the one thing that allowed me to do all those things without having to worry is there are other people, there are networks. So even when you're so incompetent, you're lost or something, you don't crash and burn. They pick you up and you probably become stronger for it. You definitely had those crash and burn moments with failing something, but you are right. People have been there for you. Yeah. And I'm absolutely enormously grateful for the people that have been there for me. For sure. Even right now, like Duolingo could get boring and Duolingo could get rough. Maybe Japanese language learning could be rough. But man, I sure as heck build a lot of even tangential and reinforced influences. That's how you feel right now? For real? How you feel for real? Yeah. You can't discount that. If we're gonna crash and burn, we're gonna crash and burn together. Is kind of what I tell people. If someone needs my help and they're in a dire situation, my only purpose would be to do the thing with them, right? Just do the thing with them. That's the best thing you can offer. Like, hey, you have a problem now? I don't know what that problem is. I don't have that problem. So let's do the problem together, because now your problem becomes my problem. So if I fail, we both fail. If there's anything committal about that, is that you're not in it alone, right? And advisors, teachers, parents, anyone who's in a mentor position, somehow, in my opinion, is likely going to indirectly make it feel that way, directly or indirectly. Like, hey, I'm going to this class because I believe in the teacher, I believe in the professor, that they have my interest, my best interest in mind. So oftentimes when you go to a great university, whatever that may look like, I'll give you like a background, in like a little spy into some professors, like background stuff. Sometimes when I'm like teaching a class and stuff, in fact, me and my old boss, we used to talk about how to write exams, right? And we were like, oh, you think this is a good question? Like, what if the students, like, so you spent a lot of time trying to figure out, like, oh, wait. How do we find out who are in trouble and who aren't? Like, so a lot of times the exam questions and stuff is not necessarily just for our benefit or like challenging the student. A lot of it also determines if any of the students are in trouble, right? Because the ones that are doing well, they're going to do well. That's fine. But generally speaking, you can also figure out these things. Like you can tell when a professor is designing something that is elevating the bottom line as well as challenging the top, versus a person who's like, yeah, you guys are screwed. Get out. Like, here's your F, right? So there are a lot of things that go into it. On the flip side, some people may argue, oh yeah, but you want your students to do well. It brings in more money. And it's like, yeah, it does that too. So there's lots of counter arguments, but it's one in my opinion, it's all of the above. Not only does caring about your bottom line and your students bring in more money, it's also the reason why some exams can be easy and some exams are hard, right? And that's kind of things that I don't think people will consider unless they really were end up doing the position themselves. Your Chem 2 prof is so cool. He's admitted all the failures and feels like he is one of the students. Like his explanations are so well thought for people who don't do well with all the big words. Yeah. For myself, I think when the whole class does well, I think the class does well. So oftentimes I'm more of that guy like, yeah, I can't. Sometimes it's difficult to talk to 40 people at the same time. So office hours. It's generally office hours. But here's the kicker. In this day and age, you could have all the office hours you want as a professor, and the kids just don't want to talk to you. It's because it's become to a point where like they're insecure, and what I mean by that is it's hard to encourage someone to be like, yo, like if you're having trouble. So instead, at least in my opinion, with me and other people, we go about trying to figure out how to find out which students are in trouble, as in like which students are struggling, because yes, we need to help those students before, and it's a lose-lose situation, by the way. If a student drops out and a student fails, like if that keeps going on, it hurts the program as well. You lose money for having lots of dropouts after you have accepted them into your college. So it's a lose-lose. It's not the thing where like, oh yeah, we might as well just cut the rope, let the student fail, hope they transfer out of the university. That's just, in my opinion, a lazy band-aid. So lots of times nowadays, students can't even express, at least in my opinion, I'm given the impression I no longer work like in a teaching capacity or something. It feels like even the students who go to college are having problems expressing what their problems are, or even seeing that they have a problem. So it's definitely in a way up to a teacher to also be able to see that their student is struggling. You can have all the office in the hours in the world and be as accessible as you can. However, you have to still encourage the students to be able to go seek advice and whatnot. And that's kind of the thing, right? I think the internet has made it so that, oh, you can always solve your own problems. That's kind of like another deep cut here. Nowadays, I feel like people are so sure of themselves when it's okay to bank on someone you have access to. It's one of those things like, how often do you say, oh yeah, I got a guy, let me go talk to them? Instead, it's more like, okay, let me go research it. Okay, so X, Y, and Z says this. I'm like, okay, well, if they say this, then that's fine. It's no longer like, wait, let me spend a day, or give me a day or two. I know someone who has gotten a lot of experience here. I'm just gonna go talk to them. That might be your parents, by the way. So that stuff happens way less now. And then there's to the point where I think the vast majority of people are like, nah, I got this. It's like, what do you mean you got this? And it would be like a 18-year-old who believes that their future is being a hyper polyglot, and they have determined what their first like 30 years of professional life is going to look like, all because the internet has hustled them into thinking that they could plan all that out. I'm like, I'm 37. I wish you luck, but even I would not be confident at the age of 18. Imagine knowing everything and yet expecting to learn something and have that stuff that you learn along the way not change any of your perspective. Somehow your perspective is going to stay the same regardless of how much you learn along the way. That's what the internet, in my opinion, has kind of convinced a lot of people that is normal. That's why the plan I made, this space for advice and recommendations, yeah, I open to that type of feedback. Indeed. Yep. Indeed. Indeed. Good head. Good head. How does that say? Atama ga ii, right? Atama ga ii. A good head or smart in Japanese. Atama yeah. This? Atama ga ii. Atama ga ii. Yeah. Atama ga ii. A good head? Yeah, yeah. A good head. Yes. I don't know why it keeps changing to English. Yeah. This. Good head. A good head. Oh. I mistyped. Sorry. There we go. Oh yeah, if you look up on Reddit, people advice on pharmacy is so negative. Yeah, I can imagine. They just tell people not to go into it. Yep. Which some of the reasons they list are valid. Of course. Just it seems maybe the path they went down is not the common one or something they did without feedback or criticism. Yeah, so the question is, did they offer a very great narrative that confirms things based on fear, doubt, and uncertainty, as opposed to evaluating, like the points can be incredibly valid. That's what confirmation bias is, right? You can confirm as many valid points as you want. It doesn't change the validity of the points. They are valid. The question is, did you get more than just confirmation bias? Right? If you start off negative, did you also get other things? Right? Most things can sound incredibly provocative if you only see confirmation bias. Also, Jozu, uphand. Uphand, Jozu. Yes, manifest. Yes. I'm gonna finish this prompt and I'm gonna switch gears. We gotta switch to Mandarin and put in some Mandarin work. Mandarin is not on review right now. So son of a... Oh, it's Kimas. Did I put Hikimas? Oops.
おしゃれなレストランでステーキを食べます。
Hang on, it's fine. It's fine. I'm fine. We'll be fine. Oshare. Oh, no. Oshare na restaurant. Steaky. Okay. We're going to eat steak. Oh. Contractions.
この白いコートはどうですか?
Contractions, man. Yes, I think the bias is against retail pharmacy. Yeah, big pharma. That's fair enough. Which I plan to specialize in pharmacological oncology, and there's not much advice on that. I see. Yeah, big pharma. It's a big echo chamber. Big pharma is a big deal. Like, for example, oh, here's an analogy to what you said that prompts a lot of the things. Lots of people hate Duolingo on YouTube because let's not forget that Duolingo is also big core. It's big core. It's an IPO and it's a publicly traded company. So there's quite a lot of potential confirmation bias on how to make a tool work, right? A tool is by nature incomplete, right? It specializes in something, it prescribes something. So it's not one or the other, it's part of a bigger whole for someone. If you start identifying yourself as the tool, then that is ironically the paradox that most people enter. So for example, yeah, it's dependent on the user. So the tool itself is not the definition of the user. It's the user of the tool in the end, right? So a lot of times people make this really paradoxical argument about people who are in Duolingo. One of the things are like someone would come up to me and say like, oh, Duolingo is bad, don't use it. Here's my advice. Okay. And then I would say something like, well, first, can you explain to me how you know that Duolingo is bad for me? And also, can you explain to me how you know that I'm not already doing other things? Right? You didn't ask, which you did ask, Kamiya, and that's absolutely fantastic. So the asking, and then suddenly their defense was, oh, it's just like a Duolingo user to identify as the Duolingo. Like, what is this white knighting for Duolingo? Why is Duolingo a double standard? And I'm like, it's not. What you don't understand is that you yourself is identifying as someone who's anti-Duolingo. You have defined yourself as a manner of which you start by saying something and revealing your hand before offering constructive criticism. That's what the pharmacy parallelism is. You start by saying, I hate big pharma. Here's my advice. That is the preface. It is the disclaimer. When someone asks me a question, I also provide disclaimers in order to preface the advice. So people typically reveal, in my opinion, when it comes to unsolicited advice, they tend to reveal their hand first. So I use that as a manner of evaluating if this advice is appropriate for me. Well, I am a person who has used Duolingo and continue to use Duolingo. So when you start your advice by saying you're wasting your time and Duolingo is useless, how could I possibly conceive that that's not disrespectful? And also you have my well-being. You don't have my well-being in mind. Literally, someone came onto my stream once and said, oh dude, why are you so defensive and acting sarcastic? I was only trying to be kind. You started by being kind by saying the thing I'm doing is useless. How can that be interpreted any other way other than self-serving? When you asked me for advice, Kamiya, I also asked you to define something that works for you. It contextualizes my advice for something that's appropriate to you. And you asked me about Duolingo because it helps inform your next question. So that's very different. It's two intellectuals talking to each other, not someone who's out on an agenda. So that's why I do worry a lot of times when people go on subreddits and YouTubes and the algorithm. Remember that the algorithm is also predicated on echoing. It's echo chambering. So if you think you're a miserable person, an algorithm would be certainly very, very good at reminding you how miserable you are. Because if you keep looking at miserable content, it will continue to provide miserable content to you, right? It will convince you from confirmation bias for better or for worse. So opposite of that, I have been approached by very young people who think that everything comes easy to them. Meanwhile, I'm having a miscommunication with this young person. The irony, the paradox in that is this person doesn't even realize that we're having miscommunication, not necessarily because this is coming easy to them. I mean, it's not coming easy to me. I rarely think that communication is that so trivial. So that's algorithm. That's confirmation bias. What is the internet in the future going to look like? It might look different, honestly, because there's like government concerns now and people are worried. You can convince yourself of anything if an algorithm can provide enough of it. So it's wonderful that you not only have an example of trusting in a professor after analyzing and integrating what you're looking for. So that those are great indicators, like your philosophy professor. It's a great indicator that you are synthesizing information. You are critically thinking on your own, as well as being able to trust other people. Not necessarily confirming anything that agrees with you, right? That kind of thing. Have you also tried typing for the Japanese box option? Or it doesn't work, only English? You can use a tab completion manifest. So I haven't been using my mouse the whole time. So like, この白いことはどうですか? So like this. Yeah. You use tab completion to type this. So you type like H will pull how because how is the only one that has H, and then you pull the next one, which is A, and it's the only one that starts with A. Yeah, that's English. Wait.
この監督の映画は面白いです。
Yeah, did you not? Yeah, I was doing that. Wait, how long have you been here? Like, what I mean is, that's what I've been doing the whole day. Sorry. I didn't know if you were watching or not, but that's what you do, but it doesn't come up. Like, there's no keyboard. Like, you don't enter it in a box if that's what you mean. Other than that, yeah, you use the keyboard function. When I do reviews, I do keyboard function. I don't know what else to tell you. You're asking me something that I've done many times before, so I don't know if by coincidence you just haven't seen me do it like today. Like I was earlier I was talking to Kamiya for like 2 hours. The only thing in there was the Japanese box. I don't know. I'm not sure if you're referring to something else that I'm not unaware of. Yeah, I like Duolingo, it's fun, and I like reminders plus the competitive factor. Fair enough. Like it's how things work before making a negative judgment or hearing other people share their negative experience doesn't mean you would have that same experience. Exactly. But I also take that negative advice and keep it to the back of your mind to compare. Exactly. You can use any advice as a form of comparison because you have to interact with these people, right? For example, right? If you are to become a professional, one must encourage oneself to be cognizant of all your opponents. So what makes it less discouraging to me? Well, I know that every 2 months in English. Yeah, in English. So in this case, you type the English. So you would like type this. You would type the sentence out, or you would try to type the sentence out. So like this. I didn't read this director's movie are interesting. Yeah, you would type the English. As opposed to W or and like yeah. So you would type the equivalent. So you write T to grab T. Yeah. And then the Japanese will always be like Japanese. And then you have numbers for these things.
人人
どんなプレゼントを買いますか？
So there are a few things that you can't use keyboard for. Because they haven't implemented it. For choices. Yeah, I think what makes someone incredibly strong in their arguments and validity, like watashi, you type W. Yeah. I mean, for option this, you would type T, right? Yep. What if watashi, do you type W? Those don't come up. Oh, you mean like... Oh, you mean like this? You can't select them. Nope. Nope. No, you can't select these like the same way. If you mean this way, like can I pull ka? I can't pull ka by hitting KA. Because otherwise it's just a box. Like you just get a box. Yeah. Oh, I didn't know that's what you meant. Yeah, you can't pull these. Oh, that would be useful, in my opinion. Yeah, you can't pull these up. That's a good point. Yeah, I think the science, right? Science. What is the strongest point of one's hypotheses? Or like the strongest, how do you reinforce a thought, like a hypothesis, right? You test the null hypothesis. The stronger you are against all your counterexamples, the more likely the argument that you're making is strengthened, not just by confirmation evidence. So when you're trying to prove that your hypothesis is correct, not only do you need confirmation of your suspicions, you also need to refute all your criticisms, all the things that go against you. So naturally, as someone who is a streamer or something like that, who needs to make a compelling argument for the use cases and demonstrate that they're experienced at evaluating something, you not only have to address all your critics in a manner that acknowledges their existence and all the criticisms that they have, you have to address them in a manner that is receptive to those things. If you continue to do that, not only will your product and your ability to evaluate things improve, and critically, it is also becoming more comprehensive. So all of the criticisms of Duolingo, I used it to do things to plug up those things, I suppose. Like a lot of people say, oh yeah, Duolingo is contextless. It's dead sentence construction. It's like, yes, most certainly, it is very dead sentence construction. How do you solve that problem while using Duolingo? You create your own context. So for me, I brought in my own context. That journaling idea, that is something that I do outside. I bring it into Duolingo. So when I'm using Duolingo, I don't have to be absent from that. And then when I'm not using Duolingo, what does Duolingo do that the other things don't do? So when I'm using, like, when I'm on a vlog, right, and I'm thinking about these things, what can I integrate that Duolingo does well into that? So they benefit from the criticism. So if you have negative experiences, it's very important that your strongest opponents are also where you can possibly grow the most from if you pay attention to them, right? If they are earnestly focusing on taking you down, then they are probably your strongest places to get refinements, if they are truly objective, of course. Like sometimes you have to distinguish, right? They might just hate your guts, and that's that's something you have to deal with too. You have to like be able to counter argument. But if they are legitimately constructive, then they will offer you all the necessary things to accommodate Duolingo's weaknesses. For example, so when someone says, I prefer to use Anki to learn grammar, and I'm like, you're right. Duolingo really does lack grammar points, don't they? Let's go fix that. Let's go add that, and I'll continue to use Duolingo, but not for the grammar. And then when someone comes up and say, oh yeah, Duolingo kind of sucks. They don't teach you grammar. It's like, you're right. They don't. And, the person would say, well, yeah, that's why Duolingo sucks. It's like, well, yes. Like, so why do you keep using it if Duolingo sucks? Like, because I already learned grammar from somewhere else. Next. What's your next counter argument? It's like, oh yeah, well, Duolingo doesn't sound native. Like, it teaches you poor pitch accent and it sounds synthetic. And it's like, you're right. You're right. That's a really good point. And then they're like, well, that makes Duolingo useless. Like, no. Like, well, aren't you worried that you're going to have poor pitch accent and sound native? You should be listening to vlogs and comprehensive input. It's like, you're right. And I also do that too. Like, then why do you keep using Duolingo? Well, Duolingo does something else that those things don't do. Right? And now you've plugged up all the counter argument. Right? And not only that, when someone asks, oh, do you only use Duolingo? I will be able to name 16 things off the top of my head. Because I do all those things. Largely because negative people have provided me with the inspiration of things I have to plug up. So am I ever concerned about not becoming fluent with Duolingo? The answer is no. Because Duolingo is in addition to everything else. In fact, I think using something that is to other people comically bad at teaching welcomes criticism that you can farm. You don't even have to go anywhere for the advice. You just get the advice. So it's humorous in my opinion that someone says that, oh yeah, but you seem salty, like you're a really bitter person. Someone literally told me, dude, what's up with your sarcasm? You're so bitter. Like, bro, go to therapy. I'm like thinking, all right. I mean, like, you don't know if I'm going to therapy. You didn't even ask. However, all your advice, thank you for them. You're not benefiting from this advice because you're not asking for any, but you've given me advice and I'll take it. Thanks. And that's about it. Right? Literally insulting me to my face, but it's relatively inane because obviously for every one of them who choose not to grow from an interaction, I have benefited from it. So you can't really be salty about benefiting from free advice that no one asked for, I suppose. You can use it however you want. I think what you are explaining helped me with kono, kore, sono, sore, and the likes of those. I wrote those in sentences outside of Duo to try to get a good sense of what context it is used in. Yeah. Anki too. Yeah, exactly. It's great for that story building. Yeah, I built stories around the quote-unquote lack of context, right? So here's the thing about the whole like dead sentence construction. You're going to have to construct your own context anyways, right? So I did use other ways to construct context with all these things. However, if I'm already doing it in Duolingo, I probably don't even need a tool anymore to construct the context for these things because I've been doing it. And it's due to the criticism of other people. However, they never asked me if I had trouble contextualizing anything. Now, if you're not very imaginative and you don't like doing story constructions, and you tell me that, I would advise you to not use Duolingo because it doesn't provide enough context until you get to a very specific point in Duolingo. Perhaps my only workaround of this is if you have enough Japanese comprehension and you can skip all the way to section 3, unit 38, I think. There is story content. And actually, when you get into section 3, occasionally, like 30% of the time, you might get prompts. But that's not sufficient. If someone is like completely unable to create stories, right? It has to be aided. I'm not that kind of person. I'm a creative. Like I like being creative. I don't want to literally see it. So actually, it's actually quite entertaining to imagine where the heck I would use these phrases in the first place, right? And that's extra work I'm doing. So what does that do? That slows me down. But to what end? I'm already making stories. So if you're asking me to imagine how I'm going to use these phrases, I'm already doing that. I don't need Duolingo to provide me the incentive of when I'm going to use those phrases. Like yabai, and even Genki, depending on the situations, right? I'm on section 2, unit 3, but I take my time and write the words and vocabulary, maybe even try to decipher. Yes, decipher grammar. And then if you cross-reference it and see if you get the decipher right on the implicit grammar, it's actually really fun. That's what I did for like the first, I don't know, couple weeks. It kind of slow rolling with the grammar points, but whenever I say like, oh yeah, this is a grammar point, let's go see if how off I am or how on point I am. And it's kind of fun. It led to a bunch of really comical moments where like, oh no, you would think that makes sense. And then someone chimes in, it's like, nah, you would think it makes sense. And it turns out it wasn't. And then sometimes someone's like, hey, have you noticed this? It's like, yeah, I have. Okay, let me best explain this. It's probably this, right? And then you get like, you nail it and it feels great. If you don't nail it, it's still funny because you tried. So there's a element of Duolingo where it doesn't hold your hands, ironically. And that's grammar. It definitely does not hold your hands with grammar. And I think that's almost intentional. That's legitimately almost intentional. That doesn't hold your grammar. In fact, in their philosophy blog, they said that there is something natural to associating patterns while you're enjoying it and then acquiring the grammar later, then putting grammar and comprehensibility of like bigger order things to restrict the way you form sentences and whatnot. So they give you example sentences, regardless of how ridiculous it is, and allow you to implicitly figure out what the grammar rule is. So if it's not for you, then it's not for you. And my advice is do all of the above. Find out what works for you. When someone says, oh, do you learn grammar from Duolingo? Like, you learn implicitly. If you can't learn implicitly, go somewhere else. I would suggest maybe a lot of people like Cure Dolly for their grammar stuff, so go there, right? Plenty of examples. Plenty.
どんなプレゼントを買いますか?
Uh-oh. Oh, wait.
どんなプレゼントを買いますか?
Sorry. Okay. We gotta switch gears. Yeah, we gotta switch gears. Today was supposed to be a chill day. So not too bad. Although, let me make sure. Let's plan something here. 1, 2, 3. 4, 5, 6, 7. 7. Okay. We have 7. We have 7, 23, 30. So am I able to do 10 each day? We'll see. Do you write like a blog? I don't write like a blog yet. I kind of sort of try to, but it's too difficult. So my writing is really, really different from my speaking. So it's I haven't acquired a reasonable way of kind of like writing stuff. My writing is incredibly esoteric. Like I write at almost my highest level when I'm writing. So I haven't really practiced writing at a more conventional level, like a level that would be appropriate. If you're talking about like writing a blog to share, there are some examples of it. Like I attempted to write something here and there, but that didn't really work out. So for example, let me the people who knows that my writing is pretty it's very here, let me read something for you. Yeah, my writing is not for the... So, for example, I used to write like little bits of thoughts to myself. It's kind of like a... I don't know. It's a little bit self-serving, so I keep it personal on like a Discord or something, right? So I decide to try to write this every once in a while, but it kind of fall by the wayside, like shower thoughts. So, for example, yeah, these are shower thoughts. I'll give you a shower thought, okay? Here goes. Yeah, it's here we go. So, this was a comment that I thought to myself back in, it's over a year ago. And it's not meant for personal advice or anything. It's just ruminations, like shower thoughts. So, ego and empathy are relational and represent a state of mind, not necessarily a form of action. While ego focuses inwardly, empathy focuses outwardly. Without the self-awareness practice of both, one would inevitably fail to appreciate and apply either. Yet, ego, the embodiment of self-esteem and self-importance, is stigmatized and dwarfed by the overwhelming support for empathy, the ability to understand and share feelings with others. When in reality, ego is debatably necessary to develop empathy, and vice versa. Empathizing with someone's struggle or opinions by framing their thoughts around their own personal experience represents an egotistical frame of mind. Meanwhile, the ego may contribute to the self-care that enables oneself the liberty to seek interpersonal inspiration and help. And at the end, I try to do like a quote thing. Yes, you are egotistical when you are looking for self-affirmation from others, as well as when you present yourself as a representative of a large group regardless of intent. So, did that mean anything? When I'm reading this, even myself, I have a hard time, well, paraphrasing it. The point is balance. Yeah, one of the points is balance. So one of the main points here is one cannot be truly egotistical as well as completely empathetic. There is supporting the ego allows one to be empathetic, and being empathetic allows one to be egotistical, right? So if you think that in an idealized world one can be entirely benevolent and still not be selfish, that is a paradox. So for example, when you're offering to help someone, it is both egotistical and compassionate. So when you're being kind, it doesn't mean you're not being selfish. So oftentimes this happens a lot, where like someone says, I'm offering advice, I'm only trying to help, but it was rude advice and it was egotistical. Like you were offering advice based on your own selfish experiences and projection. You can be kind, but it is also selfish. It's not like independent. Like a human being doesn't simply act out of complete true altruism. It's kind of like the existential, like the philosophy of is there such thing as true altruism? Like if there is such thing as true altruism, then being kind is sufficient for being rude, for being genuine, for being like asinine, or kicking someone over. It's like, oh, I'm only helping you, kicks the person over because you're a failure. It's like, hey, dude, you're a failure. I'm just being kind. I'm telling you the truth. I'm just being kind. That doesn't mean you're not being selfish. So all of that jibber jabber, which I'm like Yap Nation when I'm writing, it could have been explained the way I just explained it, as opposed to like some dribble. So I do write funny dribble to myself because I like writing weird. I like writing weirdly. So my YouTube comments, like my YouTube responses, are also like, it meanders between excessive monologuing to yeah bro kind of thing. So it kind of like meanders. So my blog, if I were to have a blog, it would be incredibly esoteric, and I don't have time for that, obviously. At least I'm already doing a lot of unpopular things already. I think this one would take the cake. Like here's one, my most recent one, which was also a year ago, by the way. I'll read one more for the sake of funsies. While more like a Twitter post thread. Yeah, it's more like a Twitter post thread, basically. It's meandering and pompous and egotistical that I keep to myself or to the Discord. These are in the Discord. So, but I stopped writing them because I have so many other things to engage in now, right? So here's one. While facts take many superfluous terms such as data, stats, and evidence, they are certainly immutable in totality. Totality being the key word. Factual omniscience is debatably improbable, even for the human collective, let alone an individual. Awareness of this reality breeds humility and due diligence on the interpretation of what limited facts we have as a collective. Facts don't lie, but they are rarely comprehensive, and the interpretation of them can be inaccurate. So it was a shower thought because someone told me like things, which still happens to this day, by the way. When someone says, oh yeah, the facts are, no one learns a language from Duolingo. That's the facts. Don't hate me. I'm just a messenger. And I'm like, yeah. Right? While it's immutable that there are people who don't learn anything from Duolingo, the interpretation of that data is the person suggesting an idea. So this person's interpretation is that Duolingo is useless. The facts, sure, it's immutable if they say there are people who don't learn anything from Duolingo. That is immutable. That is the facts, right? But it is not comprehensive. There's if our world, the whole entirety of the human race, cannot even begin to explain how someone learns with a consensus, what are the chances that an individual thinks that they know enough facts to be able to predict an outcome? Facts are still facts. How you interpret them is most definitely not omniscient. I don't think I've been in science long enough to even feel comfortable stating anything in which it is absolutely immutable. And that's working in a profession that deals with facts or attempts to deal with facts. So that's probably my way to explain it, but it's lots of dribble. I like using fancy English when I'm writing, so I don't want to post any of the stuff that I typically write publicly because it's for fun. Like, I wouldn't take myself seriously as well. I like practicing like words and English words because it's kind of like writing poetry, right? How do you sound excessively esoteric in order to practice English? So my sentences are like incredibly, it needs a subordinate clause, it needs to have at least 2 compounded independent clauses, and then it has to integrate like an ellipses into like a quotation, into like a interjection. Like it's excessively difficult to read, and I would be a terrible blogger. So maybe not necessarily like a Twitter post manifest. At least people who post on Twitter get the general idea, but I think most of the time the things I write, likely the idea is lost somewhere in it. It's kind of like trying to read some of the novels that I enjoyed back in. I still have trouble reading to this day, but I kind of admire how they turn someone like an English language into something where you can read all the words, but you can't understand the meaning, right? And that's kind of how I write, and it's not for consumption. So thank you for asking, by the way. I do write, I just don't share what I write very often. It's kind of like a closeted hobby. Maybe I'll try it. I don't know. I always thought of when I go back to learning English, maybe we'll do a stream where we talk about English. I talk about English a lot when I'm learning Japanese anyways. Things like if someone gives me a sentence, right? Let's do this just for fun before we swap over. Wow, today has been great. It's kind of like a digression day. So let's say, like, give me a sentence, right? I'll just take what Amiya said recently. It's just scribbles sometimes, right? I would say something like say something like, my writing may be occasionally, not occasionally, sporadically varied in quality. Although I guess when they were emphasizing scribble, they might be talking about like seeing it, right? Seeing it. So instead of quality, we can say something like legibility. Right? My writing may sporadically vary in legibility, as opposed to say it's just scribbles sometimes. Or sometimes I get a little bit like jabby, and someone would say something like this is useless. Right? This is useless. So how do you tell someone that this is useless, but not necessarily like be all up in their face? Well, you may find this disagreeable. However, one may find, I don't know, whatever this is, that ineffective. Right? So how do you make this is useless approachable? Well, you may find this disagreeable. However, one may find that inefficient or ineffective. Right? Things like this. This is the you went from this is useless, 3 words, in the indicative to a consensus, like, hey, you may find this, as opposed to you will find this. So this is subjunctive. So it's in the subjunctive. So there's a chance you may find this disagreeable. And it's in the affirmative, not in the double negative as well. Another common, in my opinion, another common mistake, or not a mistake, but more direct form of thing would be like, you will find this disagreeable, right? Or you use a double negative. Most people would use a double negative where they're like, you won't be happy, or like you won't oh no, I can't do this as a double negative. What happens is they don't use may, basically, and then they will use a more negative word, like oh, I got it, sorry. Don't hate me, but that doesn't work. So that would be something that happens more often. Don't hate me. In the indicative, it is inwardly focused. So like, don't hate the messenger. Bruh. I'm only telling you the facts. Bruh. Don't hate me. It's not my problem. I'm just telling you the facts. Not only is it about you, right? The person that's speaking. Not only is it about you. You decided to use a double negative. So you framed everything in the negative. And then you exonerated yourself from any blame. So it's about you. And then you attack the person. So when I haven't done anything about like, I don't like, I'm not a person who goes around and like try to read comments and tell people how to talk. But tell people how to talk, I don't really derive a lot of a lot of satisfaction from that. However, when I read stuff, this is what I think about. So what is all of this telling me about the person? And then how do I connect with that? As in, if someone says, don't hate me, but that doesn't work, how do I go about it, right? The first thing I would do is probably not try to attack them with another direct attack. Like play their game, right? So I would probably try something like, oh, don't worry, like, you're offering advice. What is there to hate, right? You're trying to do it out of your kindness of your heart. So, quote unquote, you play to their ego, right? You play to their ego. However, there is some compassion here. That doesn't work. And then you ask them, why doesn't it work? Can you explain to me why it doesn't work? And you go from there. It's not someone you could say like, oh, I would disagree firmly and ask them to defend themselves. I would ask someone who say like may, who uses may, or other types of phrasing. So that's the level, in my opinion, that's the level of English that I am currently sitting at. It's not complicated words. Don't get me wrong. Complicated words are really, really fun to be esoteric and for the sake of being esoteric. However, analyzing English diction is at the interface of psychology. So I like to test things. Like, is this guy, a person who says don't hate me, is it suggesting that this person is hated a lot? As in, like, when you say don't hate me as a preference, then it's indicating that there's a chance this person is worried about being hated. Because guess what? They probably experienced it a lot. So the question is, what does that tell me about that person? They're clearly concerned about hating them for being honest. Well, the question is, how are they being honest? And then they reveal their hand. That doesn't work. Well, when the shoe fits, right? Obviously, you'll get a lot of hate if you dictate and try to gaslight people. And then tell yourself that it's not rude, it's not inconsiderate, because, bruh, I'm just spilling facts. Like, you're not just spilling facts. You've made two subjective comments here. They're interpretations. I'm very informal typing unless I need to be formal, but my essays are well thought out and as formal, knowledgeable as possible. Yeah, that's probably a great example. So, I feel like doing this will get a lot of flack and whatnot, and I don't want to be that kind of person. I'm not a person who makes... I don't want to be a person who makes people worry about what they type all the time. I usually like to be encouraging. Don't be able to express yourself, but also know what consequences come with it, right? Like, for example, just a little bit example. Someone says, I don't understand why everyone around me is so toxic, for example. And they're specifically referring to like a recent friendship break, right? And I needed to understand where this person's coming from. So, I asked them a few questions, very big questions that allow a lot of information. Like, what do you think broke the friendship? Right? And it took about 5 sentences. They explained 5 separate reasons in 5 separate sentences. This is not something made up. So I kind of remember this pretty... All 5 of them deal with how their friends are incompetent. You don't have to answer or provide advice, honestly. Oftentimes, like Socrates, right? If you ask the appropriate questions and you understand the diction of the people, you can ask appropriate questions that can lead to things answering themselves. And then now, what do you do with that information? My response would be like, well, it seems like those aren't the right friends, right? Those aren't the right friends. Friends for you. For you. However, I want to make note that do you feel that you may have contributed, right? Is there a chance that you may have contributed something to this? Because what I clearly hear is I don't understand why you were friends in the first place, right? Based on what this person said, how did you guys become friends in the first place? And has that changed? Because ultimately, if they were this bad, what can you do? What can the person do to prevent this from happening again? Right? So you're trying your best to synthesize the information. They offer like 5 things that they don't like about their friends. And the idea is to synthesize that information and offer ways to like, hey, well, there are ways to kind of tell if these things happen, right? Have you considered trying to do that? And in the future, then, the idea is you're trying to help this person not end up in a situation that they can clearly express. Right? That's kind of the idea, right? So then they own the idea. You don't own the idea. And that's far more powerful than prescribing something to them. Right? It's based on their ideas and their context. So even when you're offering unsolicited advice per se, it can be framed in something that's relevant to the person you're talking about. How is this selfish on my part? Helping this person makes me feel good. So back to that little like dribble I was talking about, it's still selfish in some sense because I want to help this person. It makes me feel good when I succeed. So even if it's compassionate, so it's kind of a mix of both, just to integrate some other stuff. So this is how you solve problems, in my opinion. Like someone who is around lots of problems, who are around a lot of people, humbly, I'm saying humbly, I might know a thing or two about how to resolve conflicts, especially with oneself. Oftentimes, lots of these are conflicts with oneself, as opposed to the other way around. And then I would probably go and add a little bit. I would probably try to boost their self-awareness. And the self-awareness is something like, do you think your friends are like you? As in, do you feel like friends are the same? Like, do friends trust each other because they're the same? And sometimes they say yes or no. If they say yes, I would say something like, well, if you guys are similar, what do you think how your friends feel when they are breaking up? If they're similar to you, do you think your friends think you're incompetent and not understanding and solo player? It doesn't work well in a team. So the idea is to boost the self-awareness that oftentimes when you incentivize to be reasonable or something, there's a natural inclination that your friends are probably also reasonable. There's a lot of self-awareness that goes around to observing the people around you. Because oftentimes when you're self-serving and deflecting and miserable and depressed, oftentimes if you did manage to make friends, they are often also that in a compromised way, right? So sometimes it can take some perspective without ever introducing any new information. Like I'm not introducing any new information that isn't already apparent to that person, at least. Let's just give an example. I don't know where this idea was coming from. Oh, it's about English. It's about language. Somehow. But yeah, that's something. The people who start negative maybe haven't had enough encouragement, or maybe someone put them down for the same time. Exactly. So oftentimes, some people would say like, oh no, you only care about being right and stuff. It's like, no, I'm only concerned about where's this coming from? Why are you so angry? And then they're the ones that tell me I'm angry, right? So then I try something else, because that would be gaslighting. And if you gaslight a gaslighter, you just get into this into this tug and pull. It's like, no, you're being insensitive. No, you're being insensitive. Or no, you're the double standard. No, you started first. So then it becomes like this really pointing blame game. The idea is to try to get access to how to make them feel less attacked, or like something. And my last engagement with this type of situation went really far south because I was being sarcastic, and that sarcasm was possibly unwarranted, and that was the last straw for that person already. So it was like a sun going supernova. You can't stop it, right?